What we did was we obviously then put the draft out for comment. We did a number of roadshows and stakeholder engagement sessions. So we took each and every one of those comments, and then we realized that in terms of making traction on the policy, we can basically implement the clauses we feel that we can start to work on. Those that are obviously less controversial, we felt we could work on. Those that were prone to a bit more debate and need a bit more thinking, we felt that where we could put in sunset clauses and defer them. And then others we felt that we needed obviously the cabinet endorsement. So in terms of making sure that we get progress immediately as soon as possible, we finalized the draft transformation policy to make it a finalized version. The finalized version will have all the clauses that we can implement now, and then those for which maybe, let's say, some more deliberation is required, we put in a sunset clause, and we've marked them up front. We've marked them accordingly. So they'll have some minor amendments, but more or less it's the same as the draft transformation policy. There were certain clauses that already we were implementing. We just needed to maybe change our procurement documentation, our pro formas, etc. So those we immediately changed. So as we stand right now, it's been finalized and approved by the minister. So that is underway, already being implemented. The more, I would say, sticky clauses, those are the ones we will need to obviously go and have an engagement session with Cabinet, get Cabinet endorsement. Once Cabinet has approved all of those, then the full policy in its entirety will be implemented, can be implemented from there. Yes, and that is in terms of looking at the principle of the transformation policy, making sure that at least you can segment the market accordingly, because what we found in our engagement was that the lower grade contractors felt that you have a grade 9 that can compete for a work that's obviously should be done maybe by a grade 5, but you can't get the grade 5 competing on a grade 9 work. So those are the kind of distortions that we are seeing in the market. Obviously those are questions that you need to raise with the CIDB as well, but hence the principle in the transformation policy is such that you start to segment the market where the grade 1s to 4s are in their own market and play in their own space and develop in their own space, the 5 to 7s and the 8s and 9s. So I think that was the principle behind it, to say how can we get more equitable allocation of work amongst the sector as a whole and not get the market distortions that we're getting at the moment. That's its own process. It's difficult for us to say, but we have discussed it with the minister. Our board is aware, and there's continuous engagement on the topic as well. Yeah, we've now caught up in terms of the backlogs. You will recall that we had some issues we need to clarify with National Treasury in terms of our evaluation system on the provisional sums. So we had, in essence, about 54, 55 odd tenders that we had to now kind of defer until we resolved our issues with National Treasury. Those we've now started doing the awards for, and those are coming onto the market. So I think the engineering fraternity will be a bit relieved in terms of us bringing work out to the market. Obviously that has meant a slowdown in terms of when they would have gone into construction, because those are for design work. So we'll start to try and catch up on that particular backlog. But rest assured now that there is work coming out, and we are dealing with all the issues with National Treasury as well. It depends. A lot of them in terms of the design work, it varies in terms of what we budgeted for in terms of the timelines. But we do know that we will be feeling this lag for some time to come until we catch up with it. So we had to revise our targets for the year. So in terms of, for example, work like reseals and rehabilitations that we might have thought we could have done this particular year, we've had to now defer that out because we need to give obviously time for the engineering and design consultants to finish off the work. That's still an ongoing risk. I think the improvement is dependent on the level of engagement and how proactive we are in terms of dealing with it. There are cases where I think it's about a breakdown in communication. A lot of it is dealt with obviously by the relationship between, I would say, the contractors, subcontractors and the community. Hence we've come up with the 14-point plan to try and mitigate against some of these. Also coupled with that, you've got the transformation policy. So all these are efforts on our side, both tactical and strategic, to try and make sure that we at least can mitigate against the risk of closures. But this is an ongoing risk. It needs all of us in terms of engagement with National Treasury, communication drives, awareness drives and marketing drives. Obviously, you can see in terms of where the economy is going, the desperation for work is out there. But we need to make sure that things are still equitable. We don't break the rule of law. And at the same time, we can make sure we give opportunities to everybody and everybody can compete on a fair basis. Well, they do what they can. At the same time, there are situations where if you bring in law enforcement and you interdict, that is warranted, that's fine. But then there are other times when a strong law enforcement presence actually exacerbates the tensions on the ground. So you have to take a very case-by-case approach in terms of what is the best effective way to deal with it. Obviously, you do stakeholder engagements, you set up the PLCs, you speak to the main contractor, subcontractors, and you try and get the principles in place. But then where all else that fails, you then have to then obviously rely on the law enforcement because people's lives are at risk. But the issue is that the priority is that people's lives need to be considered first as well. What we have done through the 14-point plan, that was our first tactical intervention to make sure that there's fairness and equity and access and inclusivity in terms of the subcontracting. That was a tactical intervention. Strategic intervention was the transformation policy. I alluded to clause 6.1.12, whereby we said CDP projects going forward, we would like to have them exclusively for grade 1s to 4s, where it will be a learning environment for them with classroom teaching and practical work on the ground. And then we've also said that as part of the transformation desk, we're going to have a small contractor, supplier, emerging consultant development desk. Some of the things we can't do as Sanral because we're not geared up. But what we are doing is we're going to have partnership agreements with external service providers such that if we get SMEs and small contractors that need, for example, training in financial management, in contract management, in skills development, we can link them and partner them up with somebody, a service provider through whom we have a standing agreement with, and then they can provide them with the necessary skills and bridge that particular gap. So we will be a conduit in certain aspects. Certain aspects we can give direct development support and advise, but for others we will rely on the strength of the partners and the industry, etc.